Can we talk about Nate Diaz for a second? Man, does this guy have a way of staying on the front page of the news or what? He's always finding a way to keep his name in our mouth. So, if you haven't seen the video yet, Nate Diaz choked a guy completely unconscious in a street fight down in New Orleans. Keelan, roll that beautiful beam footage. So as you can see, a bunch of guys are gathered up outside after this Misfits boxing event. Misfits boxing is like this influencer boxing card. These things are getting huge. Tons of internet stars and celebrities are showing up to all these events. And with internet stars come the Paul brothers, one of which is Jake Paul, who is scheduled to be fighting Nate Diaz on August the 5th, ironically. Now, Jake and Logan were not involved in this brawl, but who was involved in it is a dude named Rodney Peterson. And apparently people just think that this dude looks like Logan Paul. So anyway, Peterson comes up to Diaz, and this is in the middle of a street fight, and he starts to crowd Nate up, and he says he was just trying to defuse the situation. But man, what a terrible, terrible idea. Of all the people to walk up on in a street fight and crowd their space, you picked Nate Diaz? So first off, you've got people who say that Nate was in the right. And they're arguing that Rodney was just getting too close and Nate was just defending himself. And then I even saw some people on social media, they were going, well, Nate was just doing what anybody would do if somebody got up in their face during a brawl, which hard to call this a brawl, but then another person was like, well, if you play with fire, you're going to get burned. And people seem to think that Rodney, despite whatever he thinks his intentions were, should have known better than to walk up on Nate like that, especially during the middle of such a chaotic situation. And then some people are saying, well, this guy has apparently got some kind of amateur MMA background. He should have known better than to get in Nate's face, and that makes sense. But then there's people who are actually on the other side of the argument, who think that Nate was actually in the wrong. And they say that Rodney was just trying to help and that Nate went too far by choking him out. And then I saw somebody even said that this is like an example of Diaz's violent nature getting the best of him, or that just because he's a professional fighter doesn't give him the right to choke somebody out in the street. And so critics are really kind of arguing that he should have shown some restraint, recognized that this guy wasn't a threat a little earlier. And then they say, and maybe there's some argument to this, that this kind of reinforces some of the negative stereotypes about the MMA community. It's essential to mention that this guy actually got hurt during this altercation, even though there was no punches thrown. I think he needed like 9 stitches in the back of his head, and there's a warrant out for Diaz's arrest for second-degree battery. This just goes to show you how serious this situation has become. I think it's also worth noting the effectiveness of jiu-jitsu in a street fight situation. Like, Nate didn't even have to throw a punch, and he just totally neutralized a perceived threat. To me, that really demonstrates how useful jiu-jitsu can be in a situation like this. So, what's the verdict? Honestly, on one hand, I feel like maybe everybody that's criticizing Nate has a point. Like, the guy was walking up to him, kind of had his hands up. It didn't look like he was trying to start something. But if you're in the street and things are getting hairy around you and somebody starts crowding you up, dude, what are you supposed to do? You can't just wait on them to throw a punch. Like, you got to handle that stuff when people get into your into your personal space. So I totally understand what happened with Nate Diaz, to be honest with you. From my perspective, Nate Diaz was in the right. And then this dude goes on social media afterwards and he's talking trash about how he's going to jack Nate Diaz up next time he sees him.
So I don't know what the hell I did to Nate Diaz, but I'm telling you what, I'm going to knock him the f*** out when I know he's coming, okay? Like, you caught me off guard, dude. What, you think I was Logan? What the f***?
And I think that that is a colossal error on his part. And I know he's just trying to drum up some, I don't know, maybe he's trying to get a fight going with Nate later. He's just trying to get some clout and some followers. But yo, Nate Diaz is the wrong dude to steal from. Wrong dude. So for me, there's 2 big lessons to take from this. The first lesson being, I think Nate made the right call. And he handled the situation early so that he didn't have to take any kind of damage or really get into a big, crazy brawl. He neutralized the situation. honestly pretty peacefully. But the big lesson for me, the big takeaway, is that you gotta stay out of crazy situations. Like if you walk out of that boxing event and you see that it's getting wild in the street, yo, it's time to split. It's time to get out of there. I am undefeated in street fights, undefeated, because I don't get in street fights. Never lost a bar fight, never been in a bar fight. I don't go to bars, so it's super easy to stay out of bar fights. And really, situational awareness is the number one thing that's gonna save you in self-defense situations. Like the best way to deal with self-defense is to never be in a spot where you have to defend yourself. I do want to shout out some of the people that are supporters of this channel, all the people that are bread eaters, and especially Sheldon Whalen. He's a Jedi. He signed up for the highest level, so shout out to that dude and to everybody else who supports the channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and I kind of think you want to be a member of the channel too.